Welcome to What the Theory with your man Joel. I'm Joel, and we are continuing in the series on the Marxist critiques of modern day life. And today we're going to talk about the fetish. Now, I'm being a bit cheeky by putting fetish. I'm hoping that the algorithm will pick that up because you guys are nasty. You like hearing about sexual fetishes, don't you? Some of you probably enjoy what I'm saying now. And the fetish in this discussion is different. It's taken from the colonial days, back when pagans were seen as fetishizing objects. So to have a fetish for something is to imbue an inanimate object with godly powers, with abilities beyond the scope of what the materials represent. So it's almost a form of idolatry. And from the Christian perspective or the colonial perspective, anyone who worshipped any idols or who had a representation of their gods were seen as fetishizing that object, that it was more than just the constituent items that it relayed. Now, why am I talking about fetish when it comes to Marxist critique? The idea of the commodity. I got a couple of comments from the last videos talking a little bit about what a commodity is, and I don't think I did a pretty good job talking about what a commodity is. So in today's episode, we're going to discuss the commodity, what a commodity fetish is, and in the next episode, we shall sort of round that out with society of the spectacle. I promise you it will make some sense. Now, when you talk about the commodity, there's a difference between something being a good and something being a commodity. And I'll use this shirt as an example. So this shirt is made of cotton. It's got, I suppose, some, what is this, polyester things on the arms to make it stretchy, and it's got as well a label on the back that shows it was from LC Waikiki. Meanwhile, I need sponsors, so LC Waikiki, come on, jump on this. I'm advertising for you. Now, the cost of this shirt, when I was buying it, I had no idea who made it, who grew the cotton, who pulled together the different factors of production to make it a commodity that I could then buy. When I was in the shop, it says goods and services once rendered not returnable except for certain elements. Now, to call it a good or a service, it sort of obscures the fact that this is an item that was made not just for its use, but for exchange. The person who made it is not using it. And that's where the difference of a commodity comes in. If I grew an apple, if I have an apple tree, and I pluck the apple once it's become ripe and I eat it, that is merely a product of my labor. It's probably the same way farmers in Uganda are subsistence. They create and use what it is that they're creating. The difference comes when it's put into a marketplace. And on the marketplace, the use value might be the reason someone purchases something, but there is a little bit extra, that exchange value, the ability for an item to be exchanged for another. So a commodity in that sense is something which is made specifically for you to exchange it for another commodity. And when I say another commodity, it doesn't mean barter trade. We talk a lot about how you could exchange this MacBook for this skull. There may be a double coincidence of once where some perverted person really wants a skull and you have a MacBook that you want to give them. But more or less the way in which you can convert this into this is mediated by money. So money is the ultimate commodity. Money is a means that represent the labor that you've put in. You've sold your time and you've been given wages in respect. Now those wages allow you to then purchase the materials that you need. So far, nothing too revolutionary. But the Marxist idea behind that is when we start to abstract to that level, we start to forget what actually makes these things valuable. So moving from this shirt to this mark, probably thousands of people were involved in the creation of this product. But I only represent it as Apple in the United States has made this product. I don't think about Foxconn, the industry that pulls together all the hardware. I don't think about the different coders that put together the software. I don't think about the people who create the apps. I don't think about the marketing force, the logistics, how it was put on a truck and brought to me. All of that effort is what makes this item valuable, right? Now, the use value of it is I use it to get onto the internet, I use it to do my work, I use it to record notes, whatever the case may be. But there is a difference. In fact, even in the way I'm talking about it, I'll talk about it as a Mac and not a laptop. It has a certain aesthetic. If you go back and watch the ads that were running when the Mac was coming out, it was the difference between being a Mac and being a PC. And what was being represented were the kinds of people that consume this kind of product. And so the Marxist critique is that extra enjoyment, that surplus enjoyment that you get from being associated with this product, that extra value is what is commodity fetishism, because there's nothing inherently in this product that makes me superior to someone who has a Dell laptop. But the perception still exists, and we live according to that sort of ideology. And that ideology is masked in that it's given to us as sort of a form of advertising. Now, advertising is the one thing that everyone thinks doesn't work on them, and that's precisely why it works on all of us. Because it's dumb enough that you know, oh, I'm being advertised to. But it's also subtle enough that your defenses, your critical defenses, are broken down. It's a great way for you to create your identity. An identity, like we'll talk about in the next video, is not something personal. I can't exist on an island and think I have an identity. My identity has to be recognized by another. So by definition, I need others to be able to identify me with something. And the reason for products and services and why they are sold the way they are is that we are told that the commodities that we consume say something about us. And that's where the commodity fetish comes in. It's a way of idolizing, it's a way of imbuing the things that we consume with a higher meaning, a meaning beyond simply the use value, simply the reason for which the thing was created, the material cause. Maybe I'll use this table as an example. So this is a piece of wood, and when this table is created, it's for me to be able to place materials on, whether I'm going to do my work on it, if I'm going to eat on it, whatever the case may be. So that's just the material reason for this, and that's the use value of this table. But you could be purchasing it and you're told, well, this is made of mahogany, and I guess maybe it was dipped in the waters of River Nile and people prayed over it. There's a narrative that could be created over this, and that narrative is then put under a brand, and that brand is what will make a table which is made of the very same piece of wood more expensive. If this shirt had, I don't know, Yves Saint Laurent on it, it could probably be priced at a much higher rate than any other shirt. But the difference is not that spectacular. It's still a piece of cotton. There's a song by the extremely terrible rapper, Macklemore, called The Wings. Yeah, Alan is giving, he's not a good rapper. Anyway, he's all right. It's called The Wings, and it's about, if you watch the movie, I think from 2003, I think, which had Lil Bow Wow. What was that movie called? I forget. The one where he wanted to be like Mike. Like he got these magical Jordan shoes and he was able to play in the NBA. So that's a sort of comical version, and the song is also talking about how as a child he loved these shoes. He thought that getting these Nike shoes would make him like Mike, and Nike, sort of ran this campaign in which it became a super billion-dollar business by attaching itself, that symbol of the Nike brand, with great athletes. And the idea that if you could purchase those items, in some way you were identifying with the greatness of that athlete. And no one exemplifies that more than Michael Jordan. I mean, the Jordan brand it's still going strong. He retired decades ago, and he's still being lauded as the greatest player ever, in part because of the commercial success that he was able to bring both to the NBA, the city of Chicago, but most importantly to the branding of athletes, and that's why that value has been inflated. But in the song he sort of talks about how him buying those shoes never really did feel that expectation that he thought it would. That the consumption of that commodity, while it gave him a reason to pursue it, it gave him a reason to pursue another commodity, which is money. It meant that he was able to then sell his labor, sell his creativity to obtain another commodity, to then be able to purchase this thing that he was fetishizing, that would then give him a sense of completeness. But he was never able to complete that. Now, the interesting thing about that song is once it became very popular, The NBA and all of its affiliates started using that song in some of its commercials and highlights. Now, the song's purpose is critiquing the very idea that you could sell things, especially to kids and to fans, that would somehow make them identify much more closely with the athlete. It's not just a shoe that you can use to play basketball, but it says something about you. It says something about who you are. And ironically, when they played that song, it was a different version. It was almost a clean version. And Macklemore took a lot of heat for that. And his answer and his response was that he thought because people would hear this song, they would be tempted to download it, and then by downloading it, they'll hear the full message. So again, that's part of a longer story of how even when we try to escape this idea of commodity fetishism, it's a very difficult thing because in order for you to survive, in order for you to make bread in the social relations that we have, you need to sell something. You need to offer a service. And you want to maximize the returns of that labor. So if you're presented with a scenario where you critiqued a certain form of commodity, and the people who sell that commodity then said, we're going to pay you millions of dollars to utilize that critique, you're put in a sort of bind. And it also almost communicates a sense of impotent rage that you have inside of you, that you can rail against the system, but that railing is part of the system. And if anything, it's probably a way for you to just ease your mind from something that you disagree with. So he disagrees with the concept of selling people shoes as a way of telling them that it will make them complete or make them identify with great athletes. And that very notion, that very structure recouped that message and used it to sell more shoes and made him valuable. So he became implicit in the very system that he was trying to battle. And that's part of the critique of Marxism that, it resonates with me. For the longest time, I never really understood. I used to think people were just arguing and, they're sort of complaining, and that the world has always been this way. But the world hasn't always been this way. I mean, when we talk about use and exchange value, commodities they existed before a capitalist structure, but now almost everything has become a commodity. Infrastructure is being sold as a business, real estate, education. Almost every sphere of life has been co-opted by market forces. And that rationale is so dominant, it's that there are no longer other options. It's almost like the starting baseline, and that's the danger of any ideology. It's not that capitalist production isn't profitable. If you read the manifesto, obviously, it's the most, the bourgeois relationships are the ones that created enormous amounts of wealth, and they continue to propel us towards great innovations. The problem is the relationships between ourselves now become commodity relations, and that's the idea of commodity fetishism. It's not so much that these items become imbued with a sort of spiritual sense. It's that the way I then relate to other human beings is alienating. I don't know who stitched together this shirt. I don't know the level of artistic integrity that they put in. I don't know whether they were stressed out. I don't know what kind of exploitative scenarios they were under. And everything I look at on this desk, I don't know who was involved in it. I don't know what the narrative was. And it's obscured by the branding. And because of that, it's exhausting. I also, when I walk into the shop to buy this laptop, the person selling it and me buying it, we don't really have a substantial relationship. It's mediated by the commodities that we're exchanging. They see me not just as a person, but as a customer, as a client. I see them as someone who's trading. Now you may ask, what's wrong with that? Essentially, there's nothing evil with it, but it hides the relationship, the power relationships and the dynamics that exist. The money that's going to Apple, I don't really see how it's connected to stuff that's going on in Congo, for instance. I don't know what's going on at Foxconn. I don't know whether the people who are making this actually are invested. I don't know whose ideas are in this. Now, I would like to think that people were given a wage, they were paid for that labor, but I also don't know. And similarly for them, when they're purchasing something, they don't know the reasons or the ways in which I was able to obtain the funds that were used to buy this. And I think the relationships that we have, the ultimate argument is that we now subsist under these relations. We have to contort ourselves, we have to display ourselves in a certain manner in order to obtain certain commodities that become the basis for how we live. And the idea is that because of that, how we walk into the marketplace affects not only how we feel about ourselves, in that you start to treat yourself as a commodity. Think about the very idea of there being a labor market. That means your skills are marketable in a certain sense. There was a debate on Twitter, on Ugandan Twitter, some time back about earning 500,000 shillings. And almost everyone was arguing that, it doesn't reflect your true value. Now, the reason that feeling, you almost have to explicitly say that, is on some level, you become something that has to be weighed by market forces. And market forces are the decisions of others. If I study for years to become a carpenter, I put time into that skill, I have an idea of what my value is. But that is probably my use value. What really matters is going to be my exchange value, meaning that I'm going to have to become a commodity. If I come onto the marketplace and you tell me that, well, you making a table for me, I'll pay you 300,000, but I think it's worth 500,000. It doesn't matter what I think, it matters what I'm able to prove. And that's where the kinds of relations we have begin to deteriorate. We become reduced to what our jobs are, we become reduced to what it is that we can provide to each other in ways that are marketable. The price doesn't fully capture exchange value, but it's one means by which we exchange different commodities for each other. And that's why money is such a powerful thing. We have to have aphorisms that we say to each other, money doesn't matter, but the way we live definitely shows that money matters. It's important in the way we do our marriages, it's important in the way we make decisions to have children, it's important in the way that we sum up the value that we've created in the world. And to compensate for that, if you look at the Michael Moore example, is that that energy has to go somewhere. And so within the critique, there are almost permissible ways for us to express this dissatisfaction. Every Hollywood movie you've ever watched will have bad guys, and they're usually guys in suits or they're in the government, and it's always bad actors. They are evil individuals who are doing something wrong. The Marxist argument is that yes, there are individuals who are despicable, but there are also individuals who are crafted by the incentives and the conditions in which they are under. It doesn't matter, for instance, in my job, what my opinions necessarily are. There are expectations of what I'm supposed to do and deliver. And so that's where the words of professionalism and duty come into being. I can utter the phrase, I don't want to fire you, but I must. Now, if you think about that statement, who is making the action? Is it me or it's the job? It's the job, but I'm the one who's enacting it. So continually you are forced to contort yourself to a certain structure, whether you believe in it or not. Whether you're greatly rewarded by it or not, you simply have to live under a certain type of logic. And the critique is about, can we question why that logic exists? Because it hasn't always been that way. In another video, I'll probably talk about the view of history when we get into Hegel, about how human beings have developed in such a way that we sometimes think that we've always been this way, but we are malleable and we've changed. And the very fact that we can change gives us a duty to examine how we could change the relations by which we live under. So I hope that made some sense to you. Thank you very much for watching, and check out the next video. It's about the society of the spectacle.